Reporting live from Ivers Club, Fight Plus News, I'm John Ava.
One in particular, I think he told me he saw Nolan somewhere between like 2:45 and 3:30. He was like, Christine, yeah, we talked for a while. We talked about college. We talked about his life, his plans. And he was like, he was perfectly fine.
It's officially been 1 month today, and the case of Nolan Wells continues to be a mystery. Now, more and more information has slowly been revealed to help piece together the 18-year-old's final moments, but there still looks to be several crucial holes of what actually took place on July 4th this year. As you should know, Wells was a collegiate athlete who would travel to an island off the coast of Mississippi with a group of friends. They would return, and he would not, in which his body would be found 2 days later. On the same part of the island the boat he traveled in was anchored. Now, in the aftermath of him missing, several questionable things would arise, like his misplaced phone and keys, to inconsistent testimonies in regards to his whereabouts as the day continued. Now, before autopsies and toxicology reports were even completed, some online, including Sheriff John Ledbetter, who is over the case, would suspect that Wells' passing looks to have been an accidental drowning. At the core of those feelings for some that Wells drowned was the claim that he must have been drunk and made some poor decisions while at Horn Island. At the top of the first reports around the case, his father, Elmore Wansley, would push back on such claims because Wells was getting ready to start football training for his sophomore year at Southwest Mississippi Community College. Now, despite his father suggesting that Wells drinking heavily didn't make sense to him, it was revealed that on July 5th, a witness would supposedly tell authorities that Wells' intoxication was heavy. Now, this would be revealed in an email report, according to outlets like ABC News, as it has been explained as a description sent on July 5th by the Marine Patrol as part of attempts to find Wells after he went missing. In the email, it listed basic information for Wells, including his physical description, as searchers scanned the island for signs of him. Now, as you continue reading this document, it will go on to say, food intake, unknown, alcohol, heavy. You see, the release of this report would be an issue for many, given that it looked to help inflame media bias, as some outlets ran the story of Wells being heavily intoxicated in their headlines, which could minimize the outrage some may have about the case. Now, on Friday, during a new interview with Don Lemon, Wells' mother would make a shocking reveal that she was recently reached out to by a coach who knew Nolan, and they would confirm that they saw him on Horn Island and he appeared to be fine, in a total contrast of his missing persons report claiming that he was heavily intoxicated.
We've seen this before, right? Pattern recognition. We've seen this where things have happened, especially when we talk about the Black community. And, after the death, it's a smear campaign. It's, what can we find out about this person? What can we say? If you were in our situation, how would you feel if there were millions of people who are saying, oh, hey, well, he was at an island, he was heavily drunk. And again, even with the drinking, there are so many conflicting stories, only because I have spoken with adults who knew Nolan very well, coaches that were out there. One in particular, I think he told me he saw Nolan somewhere between like 2:45 and 3:30. He was like, Christine, yeah, we talked for a while. We talked about college. We talked about his life, his plans, and he was like, he was perfectly fine. Because I think it had bothered him too that there was this narrative of, oh, he was sloppy drunk. Like and it started at the very beginning. It was, oh, he was sloppy drunk. And I'm like, but was he though? Or is this a narrative that you guys want to use to kind of have us just accept that it was a drowning?
Now, what is also interesting is that 2 weeks ago, before his mother's newest reveal, during his first interview ever, Wells' friend who he traveled to Horn Island with, Warren Hudson, would also go on to reveal that Wells appeared to be fine every time they spoke that day on the island.
I talked to Nolan, and Nolan was drinking. Everybody was drinking, most of everybody. And Nolan seemed completely fine every time I talked to him. We had just regular conversations. And
now, given that these two statements alone claim that Wells did not appear drunk, and that may have been more of a reflection of some around him, looks to remove the theory that he must have been drunk and drowned off the table. As of this report, Wells' toxicology report has yet to be released to officially confirm his alcohol level at the time of his death.
Well, Nolan Wells was heavily drinking that night. Yeah, I heard he was drinking. Isn't that crazy? Yeah, I heard he was drinking. Yes, baby, we all know he was drinking. If you actually look At like half of the photos from that day, he was holding a High Noon or some other type of seltzer in almost every other photo. We already knew he was drinking. Why are you now talking about it? What is the benefit of being, oh, he was heavily drinking that day? The better question is, who is providing alcohol to people who are 18, 19, maybe 20 years old? And from there, what role does that play in his murder? The question is, what happened to him and why did he not make it home when everybody else did? Not was he drinking or not. Who cares? A, we already knew that. And B, what's that got to do with anything? Y'all will not distract us from the truth and the reality of the moment. The question is, what happened to him? Not why did it happen? Not, well, what negative light could he have possibly been painted into to justify the harm that befell him? Shut up, girl. What happened to that baby? Why did that happen to that baby? Why is that the news y'all trying to push and not the things we heard on the audio? Not the fact that his mother is suing everybody and their mama trying to get as much paperwork as she can, as much documentation as she can to figure out what the heck happened to her baby. That's what we should be talking about, not he was heavily drinking. Oh, local teenager heavily drinks on boat and more news at 8. Shut up. Don't PM.
Why do they keep saying Nolan Wells was drinking heavily? Like, have y'all not met no high school people in the last 30 years or something like that? I went to a white high school, so I feel like I can speak on it. As soon as I hit 9th grade at that white high school, them people was bringing liquor bottles to school. And if we're being real, we talking about 18-year-olds going to a party on an island. I've been to so many house parties, not even on an island. Everybody was belligerent. So you're telling me that y'all is making it a point to say, oh, but he was heavily drinking on an island with a whole bunch of other 18-year-olds, like they ain't doing the same thing?
I shouldn't be surprised they're trying to victim blame Nolan Wells for allegedly being drunk. There's a few things I want to say about this. If Nolan Wells was heavily intoxicated, that to me is even more reason why, as his friend, you should have not left him on a fucking island 10 miles away from the mainland. If my friend is drunk and not thinking clearly and they're saying, no, I want to stay on this island, too fucking bad, get in the goddamn boat. Which brings me to the second thing I want to talk about. If Nolan was drunk, his friends probably were too. Should they have been operating a boat? Anyone gonna check into that? Because apparently they had a call for a tow. What was going on there? And number 3, probably the most important piece of information, if he were drinking and he was smashed super drunk, he does not deserve to die. This right here is so fucking shitty.
On Saturday, as a way to shut down any claims and alleged toxicology reports, Sean Tyndall, who is the commissioner of the Mississippi Department of Public Safety, would express that any toxicology report shared was fake. On his Facebook, he would go on to write, "The purported toxicology report from Nolan Wells circulating through social media on various outlets is fraudulent. Nolan's family, friends, and most importantly, Nolan himself deserve better. Fraudsters, AI, and social media are a recipe for disasters. All they want you to do is click and share. Don't." In previous interviews, Tyndall would also express that AI and misinformation has made things harder for investigators in the case. As of now, the next steps for the case is waiting for the investigation to be finally complete, so the district attorney and the grand jury can then meet and determine if there was any foul play or found criminal activity for this to move to a trial. Just several days ago, Wells' state autopsy would officially be completed. Let's talk about it more in the comments below. Now that it appears that Wells looks to have been not heavily intoxicated, as his parents suspected early on, does it now increase your suspicion of foul play being a part of his death? For Hype Plus News, I'm John Abba.